In this video, we're going to be finding the product of two functions. Then we're going to state their domain and then evaluate the product when x equals 9. So when we want to find the product of two functions, let's say f and g of x, where our first function is f of x, change colors there, and our second equation is our g of x, then all we need to do is take our f of x and then multiply that with our g of x. So to find the product of f and g of x, we're going to plug in x squared because that's our f of x, and then we're going to multiply that by our g of x, which is the square root of x. So this might be easier to rewrite as x to the 1/2 power, because here we can now see that we have common bases, and that's going to allow us to add our exponents here. So we'll have the product of f and g of x equals x to the 5/2 power, which we can then write as the square root of x to the 5th, and then that reduces to give us f of g of x equals, probably don't actually need to rewrite that. We'll just move our 5th power and write it as the square root of x raised to the 5th, like that. And so here we have the product. And so now, right, so that's our product. So now we want to have our domain. Now notice here that we have our x value inside of a square root, which means that our value needs to be greater than a negative number. So it needs to be 0 or greater in order to be able to work. And so we're going to have x must be greater than or equal to 0. And now we need to evaluate. So our f, oops, let me rewrite that. So our f times g of 9, we're going to plug that in. So we'll plug our 9 in to the 5th power, and that's going to give us that our f of g of 9 equals 243. And so here we have our domain and our evaluation. So now we're going to do a video, or in our video, we're going to do an example where we're going to find the quotient of two functions. So we'll be trying to find the quotient of f and g of x, where f is our 6x and g of x is our x to the 3/4. And so to do that, we'll just take our f of x and divide it by our g of x. So we'll go ahead and we'll plug those in. So our f of g of x is going to equal 6x over x to the 3/4 power. Remember, this is like an x to the 1 power. So right here we have common bases, which means that we can subtract our exponents. So 1 minus 3/4 will give us a 1/4. And so that's going to give us that the quotient of f of g of x equals 6x to the 1/4. And so that is our quotient of two functions. Now, in order to state the domain, it might be helpful to rewrite this as a radical. So this can really be rewritten as 6 times the 4th root of x. So again, we have x inside of a radical, and we see that that's an even root that we'll be taking, which means the interior of our radical must be 0 or a positive number. So that tells us that our domain must be x has to be greater than or equal to 0. And now we're ready to evaluate. So to find f of g of 16, and we know it's a 16 because it said it right there, so we're going to plug that 16 in. So we're going to have 6 times 16 to the 1/4 power. And when we plug that in, that's going to give us a value of 12. And now we have our evaluation. And we're finished. So that's how to find the product and the quotient of two functions.